Normandy, July 1944. The M4 Sherman rumbled forward, its 30-ton mass a spearhead in the American breakout from the hedgerow country, and its crew, like so many others, felt the surge of momentum, a belief that the long, grinding fight was finally yielding to speed. This push, Operation Cobra, promised to unravel the German lines, but the very velocity of the advance carried an unseen vulnerability, a fragile thread stretched taut across a landscape still contested. Sergeant Frank Miller, a tank commander of the 2nd Armored Division, peered through his periscope, the green fields of France blurring into a continuous ribbon under the tracks of his Sherman, Hellcat. His unit, part of the vanguard, had bypassed several pockets of resistance, their orders clear: exploit any weakness, push deep. The initial reports from forward reconnaissance spoke of crumbling German morale and disorganized retreats, painting a picture of an enemy on the verge of collapse, a narrative that fueled the tankers' aggressive posture. The M4 Sherman, a medium tank, represented the Allies' primary armored punch, its 75mm main gun capable of engaging most German armor at close to medium ranges, though its high silhouette and gasoline engine were known vulnerabilities. Production logs from Detroit indicate that by mid-1944, over 25,000 Shermans had rolled off assembly lines, a testament to American industrial capacity, far outstripping German tank output. This numerical superiority, coupled with effective combined arms tactics, was intended to overwhelm the Wehrmacht. The strategic imperative was to deny the Germans time to regroup and fortify new defensive positions, transforming the static, brutal attrition of the hedgerows into a war of maneuver. Commanders believed that a swift, decisive breakthrough could shorten the conflict, preventing a protracted struggle across France. The spirit of the advance was one of almost reckless optimism, a collective conviction that the enemy was broken and only the speed of the Allied pursuit mattered. Yet, beneath the apparent disarray of the retreating Germans lay a calculated resilience, a capacity for improvisation that the Allied command, in its eagerness, perhaps underestimated. The roads, while seemingly open, harbored a latent threat, a silent promise of disruption that awaited the unwary. The retreating German columns, their advance now irrevocably reversed, began a methodical, destructive withdrawal. Behind the fighting echelons, specialized pioneer units moved with deliberate purpose, their mission to render the landscape impassable, to transform every bridge, every culvert, every critical roadbed into an impediment. This was not a chaotic flight, but a calculated act of denial, designed to bleed the momentum from the Allied pursuit. Engineers, often operating under the direct supervision of divisional staff, surveyed each structure with an almost clinical detachment. Charges of Springkörper 28, a powerful cast TNT explosive, were carefully placed at key structural points: the crown of arches, the base of supporting piers, the junction points of steel girders. The goal was not merely to collapse a bridge, but to shatter it, to scatter its components across the widest possible area. Ensuring that repair would be a protracted, resource-intensive undertaking. Damage reports from the period indicate that a typical 2-span concrete bridge, approximately 30 meters in length, would be fitted with no fewer than 6 primary charges, each weighing between 5 and 10 kilograms, augmented by smaller shaped charges to sever reinforcing steel. This systematic approach, honed over years of defensive warfare on the Eastern Front, contrasted sharply with the often improvised demolitions of earlier campaigns. The sheer volume of explosives employed and the precision of their placement reflected a deep understanding of structural mechanics and the logistical challenges facing an advancing army. The strategic implication of this destruction was profound. Every blown bridge, every cratered road, forced the Allied engineers to halt, to construct, to repair. This delay translated directly into consumed fuel, expended man-hours, and a slowing of the overall operational tempo. It was an attempt to trade ground for time, to buy precious days for the consolidation of new defensive lines or for the deployment of reserves. The ideological underpinning of this scorched earth policy was clear. If the territory could not be held, it would at least be rendered useless to the enemy, a silent testament to a scorched, unyielding will. The detonation orders, often given by radio code or prearranged signal, would ripple back through the retreating formations, a series of concussive thuds marking the progressive destruction of the infrastructure. The engineers, having completed their work, would then fall back, leaving behind a landscape scarred and broken, a testament to the methodical, destructive power of a retreating army. Occupied France, August 1944. The lead elements of the 4th Armored Division, having outrun their logistical tail, encountered the first deliberate, large-scale destruction of the D978, a primary artery. This wasn't merely a crater from an errant bomb. It was a calculated demolition, a chasm roughly 30 meters wide and 15 meters deep, where the asphalt had been, the result of pre-placed charges. The advance, which had covered 120 kilometers in the previous 36 hours, now ground to a halt, the roar of tank engines replaced by the frustrated shouts of engineers. The German strategy, codified in directives issued by Oberkommando der Wehrmacht in late July, emphasized the systematic destruction of infrastructure to delay Allied mechanized forces. This particular crater, according to later captured demolition plans, utilized 500 kilograms of TNT, supplemented by captured French explosives, packed into culverts and beneath the roadbed. The charges were initiated by a remote electrical detonator, ensuring a precise, simultaneous rupture of the road surface and its underlying support. Such demolitions were not isolated incidents, but part of a coordinated defensive effort, often preceding the withdrawal of German rearguard units. Intelligence reports, compiled from aerial reconnaissance and partisan observations, indicated over 3,000 such road cuts and bridge destructions across Normandy and Brittany by mid-August. These acts of denial aimed to convert the relatively open French countryside into a series of chokepoints, forcing the Allies to expend valuable time and resources on engineering solutions rather than rapid maneuver. The immediate impact on the 4th Armored was a loss of momentum, a critical element in armored warfare. Daily progress, which had averaged 40 kilometers, plummeted to less than 5 kilometers. Fuel consumption, typically 2,000 gallons per battalion per day during rapid advances, remained high due to idling engines and repeated attempts to find bypasses, but without the corresponding territorial gain. This deceleration allowed retreating German forces to consolidate defensive positions further east, turning a pursuit into a protracted series of engagements. The engineers, already exhausted from continuous road maintenance and mine clearance, now faced obstacles requiring heavy bridging equipment or extensive earth-moving. Unit diaries recorded the frustration. The road blew apart after American tankers rushed ahead proudly. The M4 Sherman tanks, designed for speed and direct engagement, were rendered immobile, their 30-ton mass a liability when confronted with a void. The tactical advantage of surprise and overwhelming firepower diminished with every hour spent waiting for a path to be cleared. The deliberate destruction of the D978 and countless other arteries transformed the battlefield from a corridor of advance into a complex engineering problem. Each demolished bridge, each cratered road, represented a calculated exchange. German time bought for Allied momentum lost. The landscape itself became an active participant in the defense, a silent, unyielding opponent. The first light of dawn revealed the full, jagged extent of the chasm. Allied engineers, a composite team drawn from British Royal Engineers and American Army Corps of Engineers, arrived with their survey equipment, their faces grim in the early morning chill. The immediate assessment confirmed the worst fears: a complete severance of the primary logistical artery, not merely a crater, but a deliberate, deep cut, designed to impede any rapid advance. Damage reports, compiled from initial visual inspections and rudimentary depth soundings, indicated a breach approximately 30 meters wide and an estimated 12 meters deep at its lowest point. The explosive charge had been expertly placed, targeting a natural fault line in the underlying bedrock, exacerbating the disruption. The road surface itself, a relatively thin asphalt layer over compacted earth and aggregate, had offered minimal resistance to the force, disintegrating into a scattered field of rubble. Geological surveys, conducted using portable seismic refraction equipment, quickly mapped the subsurface conditions. They identified a significant proportion of fractured limestone and shale, a composition that, while initially stable, was now prone to further collapse under heavy load or sustained vibration. This finding complicated any simple backfilling operation, suggesting a need for extensive shoring and stabilization before even temporary repairs could be considered. Production logs from nearby quarry operations, hastily requisitioned, indicated a deficit in readily available crushed stone and gravel, essential for roadbed reconstruction. The nearest operational quarry, capable of supplying the necessary tonnage, was located 80 kilometers to the west. A journey that itself would require significant logistical coordination and secure transport routes. This scarcity immediately pushed the estimated repair timeline beyond initial optimistic projections. Strategic implications of the breach were profound. The road had been designated as the primary supply route for 2 armored divisions and 3 infantry divisions, totaling over 70,000 men and thousands of vehicles. Its loss necessitated a diversion of all traffic onto a secondary network of narrow, winding agricultural roads, a system entirely unsuited for the volume and weight of military convoys. This diversion alone was projected to reduce daily supply throughput by at least 40%. Ideologically, the deliberate and comprehensive destruction served as a stark reminder of the enemy's resolve. It was not a haphazard demolition, but a calculated act of denial, designed to buy critical time for defensive preparations further east. The engineers understood they were not merely repairing a road. They were battling a determined will to resist, etched into the very landscape. The quiet reflection among the lead engineers centered on the sheer scale of the undertaking. This was not a bridge blown, easily spanned by a bailey. This was the very ground itself, torn asunder. The immediate task was to secure the chasm's edges against further erosion, a preliminary step before any thought of rebuilding could begin. Northern France, August 1944. The lead elements of Patton's Third Army, specifically the 4th Armored Division, found their audacious dash across the French countryside abruptly arrested not by determined German resistance, but by the very ground beneath their tracks. The relentless pace, a hallmark of their advance, had outrun their logistical tail, leaving them vulnerable to an enemy strategy that prioritized destruction over direct engagement, effectively severing their forward momentum and placing the entire operational thrust in jeopardy. The primary impediment manifested as a systematic demolition of critical infrastructure, bridges, culverts, and key road junctions. Engineering reconnaissance reports from the 37th Engineer Combat Battalion, dated August 11th, detailed 47 separate bridge demolitions within a 50-kilometer radius ahead of the main column. Each structure, whether a steel truss spanning a river or a stone arch over a canal, had been precisely prepared with demolition charges, ensuring maximum structural compromise upon detonation. Examination of the destroyed bridges, particularly the steel girder types, revealed a consistent pattern of explosive placement. Charges of TNT, typically 10 to 20 kilograms, were positioned at the bearing points where the girders met the abutments, or at the midspan where compressive forces were greatest. The resulting explosions buckled the main supports, twisting massive I-beams into irreparable contortions and dropping entire sections of roadway into the watercourses below. The scale of this demolition effort was unprecedented for the American forces, who had largely encountered sporadic and localized destruction during their initial breakout. German engineer units, often operating under explicit orders from Army Group B, had executed a scorched-earth policy, transforming natural obstacles into impassable barriers. Production logs from Krupp and Rheinmetall indicate a surge in demolition charge output in late July, with an estimated 200,000 kilograms of high explosives distributed to forward engineering detachments. This calculated destruction effectively transformed the operational landscape, shifting the focus from rapid maneuver to painstaking engineering. The psychological impact on the forward units was palpable. The sight of yet another chasm where a bridge once stood eroded the confidence built by their rapid progress. The enemy, unseen and often unheard, was dictating the tempo of the advance through the systematic obliteration of the very pathways the Americans needed to exploit. The initial reports from the forward reconnaissance elements, relayed through field telephones and then over more secure channels, painted a grim picture for the 12th Corps staff. General Eddy, reviewing the situation maps, saw the green arrows of his armored spearheads, once so confidently drawn, now stalled, their momentum bleeding away into the shattered remnants of the French countryside. The expectation of a rapid advance, a swift exploitation of the initial breakthrough, was dissolving under the weight of an unforeseen and insidious form of resistance. Damage reports, compiled from company-level assessments and forwarded up the chain, confirmed the nature of the obstacles. The primary culprit was not direct enemy fire, but rather the systematic destruction of the very infrastructure upon which the American advance depended. Bridges, culverts, and even stretches of compacted earth road were being rendered impassable. Engineers, working under constant threat of sniper fire and delayed action explosives, documented craters measuring up to 15 feet in diameter and 8 feet deep, requiring hundreds of cubic yards of fill material and extensive shoring to repair. The sheer scale of the demolition effort suggested a coordinated, pre-planned strategy rather than opportunistic destruction. Interrogation files of captured German engineers, cross-referenced with recovered demolition plans, revealed a doctrine of scorched earth applied with meticulous precision to lines of communication. One captured NCO, under questioning, stated simply, "We make you walk." This systematic degradation of the road network was designed to buy time, to force the American logistical tail to catch up with its armored head, thereby slowing the entire operational tempo. The strategic implications were profound. Each hour of delay meant more time for German reserves to consolidate, for new defensive lines to be established, and for the initial shock of the American breakthrough to dissipate. The carefully calculated timetables for reaching key objectives, river crossings, communication hubs, and airfields, were now in jeopardy. The opportunity for a swift, decisive thrust into the German heartland, a move that could potentially shorten the war, was being eroded by the very ground beneath the American tanks. The frustration among the senior command was palpable. The enemy, outmatched in armor and air power, had found a way to leverage the terrain itself into a formidable weapon. The engineers, already stretched thin by the demands of maintaining supply lines and building temporary bridges, were now tasked with an even more daunting challenge: reconstructing an entire transportation network under combat conditions. The proud rush of the American tankers, so confident in their machines, had inadvertently led them into a tactical quagmire. The shattered remains of the road, a mosaic of fractured asphalt and pulverized stone, presented an immediate and formidable engineering challenge. Allied reconnaissance reports compiled from aerial photography and forward scout observations, cataloged over 2,000 distinct points of significant road damage across the liberated territories of northern France. By late August 1944, each crater, each collapsed culvert, represented a choke point, a potential strangulation of the advancing Army's logistical arteries. Engineers of the U.S. Army's 9th Engineer Command, a unit specifically constituted for rapid infrastructure repair, began their methodical assessment. Their primary tool was the bulldozer, often a Caterpillar D7, its 75-horsepower diesel engine proving indispensable for moving the tons of rubble and earth. Alongside these, graders and compactors, sometimes repurposed agricultural equipment, were brought forward to level and stabilize the improvised surfaces. The scale of the task demanded an unprecedented deployment of resources. Production logs from U.S. Army depots in the UK indicate that by mid-September, over 50,000 tons of crushed aggregate and 10,000 tons of asphalt patching material had been shipped across the Channel, destined for these forward repair sites. This was supplemented by locally sourced stone, often quarried by hastily organized civilian labor details under military supervision, a pragmatic solution to the immense material requirements. Temporary bridges, often Bailey bridges, became a common sight, spanning gaps where permanent structures had been destroyed. The standard Bailey bridge, composed of prefabricated steel panels, could be erected by a trained crew of 40 men in under 4 hours to span a 100-foot gap, capable of supporting up to 70 tons, more than sufficient for even the heaviest M26 Pershing tank. This modularity and speed of deployment were critical in maintaining the tempo of the advance. Road repair units, often working under intermittent artillery fire, developed a standardized methodology. First, clearing debris, then filling craters with compacted earth and rubble, followed by a layer of crushed stone, and finally, if time and materials allowed, a surface of asphalt or tar. The objective was not permanence, but immediate passability, a functional surface that could bear the weight of a constant stream of military traffic. The impact of these efforts was measurable in the daily tonnage throughput. Unit diaries from the 1st Army's Quartermaster Corps record a 300% increase in the daily supply delivery capacity along key routes within 2 weeks of major repair operations commencing. This rapid restoration of logistical flow directly correlated with the sustained momentum of the Allied offensive, allowing fuel, ammunition, and rations to reach the front lines without critical delay. The engineers worked with a relentless, almost surgical precision, understanding that every hour saved in road repair translated into sustained pressure on the retreating enemy. Their work, often overlooked in the broader narrative of battle, was the invisible scaffolding upon which the entire advance was built. A deliberate and systematic destruction of infrastructure, a policy codified as scorched earth, began to exert its full grinding pressure on the Allied advance across the German heartland. Bridges, rail lines, communication networks, and even agricultural fields were rendered unusable, not by incidental combat damage, but by calculated demolition. This was not the chaotic byproduct of retreat, but a strategic imperative designed to deny the pursuing forces any easy sustenance or passage. Engineering reports from 9 Engineer Command detailed the scale of the demolition. By late March 1945, an estimated 2,800 bridges had been destroyed in the American sector alone since the Rhine crossings, many with charges pre-placed and detonated remotely. Roadways were cratered at regular intervals, often every 50 to 100 meters, requiring specialized demolition teams to fill or bypass the obstacles before armor or supply convoys could proceed. The impact on logistical timelines was profound. A unit diary from the 1st U.S. Army recorded average daily advance rates plummeting from 25 to 30 miles in early March to a mere 8 to 12 miles by the first week of April, directly attributable to the increased time spent en route clearance. Each destroyed bridge represented hours, sometimes days, of engineering effort, diverting critical manpower and equipment from direct combat support. This systematic obliteration of the German homeland served a dual purpose: to impede the enemy and to instill a sense of desperate loyalty among the remaining populace, signaling that surrender offered no intact future. The ideological underpinning was clear. If Germany could not be held, it would not be left as a prize. This was a policy of national self-immolation, a final, destructive act of defiance. The material cost of this resistance was staggering. Damage assessments from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, compiled in May 1945, estimated that reconstruction of essential infrastructure in the Western Allied zones would require over 1.2 million tons of structural steel and 800,000 cubic meters of concrete, a scale of material demand unprecedented in the history of modern warfare.